Good evening and welcome to our testimony series here at the Well. This evening we're here with Richard and Erin Sparks and we're excited to see what God is doing in their life. Welcome to the show tonight, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Guys, we are excited to hear your story. So you have been part of the Well for how many years?
Just 2 years.
My
2
guess
years
was
past
2-ish.
Easter.
All right. So we've watched God do an incredible work in your life, and we're hoping that tonight you could tell us a little bit about your story. Don't know where you want to start, but this is your story, so you get to choose.
Well, I'll let her start, but we discussed yesterday sort of how we were going to, I guess, tag team the testimony. And we do want to say there is a lot of experiences that we've been through in our lives individually that I know me personally, God has taught me a lot of life lessons and a lot of things through those. So there's a lot of details. We're going to sort of skim through a lot of things and give generalities, but I want everybody to know, and yourselves included, that if anybody wants any details, I have no shame. God's given or taken away that completely from me. And if anybody wants further information or details, I'm completely open to give that. And I know Erin told me last night she feels the same. So
very good.
Open book, but I'll let her kick it off. Ladies first.
I'm just going to start a little bit with my background up until the point I met Richard, and then we're going to kind of go from there. But I was raised in a Christian church. My parents started going to church when I was an infant, and we were homeschooled, my siblings and I, so we really didn't have a lot of worldly influence. Our homeschool group was based out of the church, so all I knew was church. That's, that was my upbringing. That was where we were at every Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday night, all of that. Served in the Awana ministry and, just grew up very completely involved in it. When I was 12, we had a guest speaker come to our Awana class, and he hit really hard on health. Really, really hard, to the point that I couldn't sleep that night. So I went and got my mom, and she came to my room and asked me why I couldn't sleep and what I was worried about. And I told her, I said, I don't want to go to hell, And so she prayed with me, and I prayed, the prayer of salvation. But anytime any speaker would come in and preach about either eternity or hell, I would re-pray that prayer just in case the first time I prayed it, I didn't pray it right. Mm-hmm. Or the second time I prayed it, I didn't pray it all the way up till I was, in my early teens, 15, 16, I would still, every time eternity came up, I'm like, well, I need to re-pray that prayer just in case. I just want to be sure. I wasn't sure. I didn't have that surety and then I never really knew how to study the Bible for myself. When we were teenagers, we were given a devotional or a workbook. So I just thought that's how you, got what God meant for you out of that. You had to have somebody guiding you, or the pastor was preaching and you just got what you needed to out of that. Mm-hmm. There wasn't really any in-depth, this is where you start, this is how you decipher it for yourself. But there was always a tool or something that had to be involved. And reading the Bible pretty much, well, let me go back and say that I was most definitely a people pleaser growing up. And I was a perfectionist. So in order to please God, I had to perfectly please people, which, as you can imagine, led down to a whole road of I'm not good enough, because you can't please everybody, and I was trying to. These people over here think you should dress this way. Well, these people, at home, I can wear jeans or dress the way I want to, but in this situation, you have to wear a skirt, or you have to wear your hair a certain way, or you can't wear this, or you can't wear that. And so I was very conflicted growing up of, what's right, what's wrong. And if I feel that this is right or wrong, am I wrong? Am I really not saved? Should I pray that prayer again? Mm-hmm. And so the only reason I really grew to want to read the Bible or had to read the Bible was so that I would know what to say. If something came up or somebody asked me a question, I had to know what to say. Basically, because when you're saved, you're taught, you have the Holy Spirit, He comes into you, and He's the one that provides the knowledge. So I never questioned anything because I was afraid if I had a question, that meant I wasn't saved. Because if you have the Holy Spirit in you, you just understand it, you just know it. There shouldn't be any questions involved. And so growing up, I had to know the answers, because if I didn't, people would think I wasn't saved. And so I lost my place. And the same with praying. I never prayed to speak to God. I prayed so that if somebody said, Erin, will you please pray, that I would know what to say. It was basically a practice. It wasn't really
very works based, but
Yes.
no depth
Yeah.
of actual
Right.
connection with God, knowing God,
Right.
hearing from God, loving
Right.
God. It was all about the motions of
Mhm.
Christianity.
Yeah. And I thought that's what, we were taught that it's not a work-based religion, but and I don't know if it's because I was 12 and just didn't understand what truly changed meant, or because when you're 12, you don't have anything to really turn from because you're
Mhm.
12.
Right.
So I was trying my hardest to be saved and make sure I was saved. Then in 2000, I started dating a friend of mine that was also at church. We got married by 2001. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of detail because that's a long story in itself. But it was a very unhealthy marriage. And it was not God-centered at all. I mean, it was unhealthy on both of our parts. It wasn't just one single person or one person did this or one. We both had our issues, and it just didn't work. And in 2009, we were still living in the same house, but we were separated. And in 2010, I moved out and got an apartment, and I decided to live life my way because I had already tried to live life pleasing God, and this is where it got me. So I'm going to do what I want. And that's what I did. Every weekend I didn't have the boys. I was out partying and, trying to fulfill what I thought I missed out on all those years growing up and being the good girl. And that's the point in time that we met. We met in 2011, and that's where our stories start. So I'm going to go back and...
Go back in time. For me, I was sort of the same way. My earliest memory was growing up in church. My dad was raised Roman Catholic, and my mom was never raised in church. She never went to church. She knew what church was and who Jesus was, but she never was religious. And she started taking myself and my older brother to church when the little old lady kept inviting her over and over and over in Southern California to bring us to church. And when she finally took us, she could never find the old lady. Nobody ever met the old lady.
Wow.
And nobody ever knew who she was talking about. So, it's part of her testimony, but she believes that, an angel was sent to get her and us into church. And so my dad started going to church because he thought my mom was having an affair with the associate pastor. So that got him in, and that sort of created this church household that we had. And my dad was former Army, who was raised by a former Marine. So we had a very disciplined household, very structured, you will do things with proper morals and proper ethics. And we grew up in it was a four-square church, it was Assembly of God church. And I didn't have the experience of, live life by motion of rules and things like that. But I also never had like an in-depth understanding. I had really good rights and wrongs because I was raised that way from my parents. And then we were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and I enjoyed it. I never felt like I had to go. I was never forced to go. I truly enjoyed it. But I was a very, very skinny kid, and I was very goofy, and I never got angry about anything. And I would always spend my evenings trying to get my parents to laugh when they went to bed, like a little stand-up comedy session that was probably terrible, but that's what I tried to do when I was 8, 9, and 10 years old. And humor became an escape for me because I was picked on a lot at school. When you're 80-pound kid with red hair and freckles, and nobody really likes you. And my hair's gotten darker now. Now I miss the bright red hair, but when I was a kid, I didn't like it. So I got bullied a lot, and so humor became an escape for me. I never had an anger problem, never got angry about anything, but I found myself trying to force myself to fit in. And so as I got older in my teenage years, I felt like I never even fit in with a social circle at school, the youth group. I always felt like I was an outcast, even though people were laughing around me. I never felt like I was like one of the group. And so I'd always find myself alone in my room, depressed at night. I'd always find myself like out in the church parking lot. We would have overnighters because they would all go, and I was never good at basketball. And when you have an overnighter, you're inside playing basketball. I was better at baseball, but we don't play baseball inside. So I'd always find myself when they're all doing their kind of calm down group sessions, I'd be outside, feeling sorry for myself. And so it kind of led me into this behavior of, I believed in Christ. I believed that I was saved. I was going to youth conventions. I never said a curse word until I was 18 years old. And I never wanted to. I had a really good mindset. But every time I was ever in a social circle and something would come up that I knew was wrong, I would just kind of chameleon myself to roll with it. And I wouldn't say anything. I would never stand up for my faith. I would never stand up for anybody who was being made fun of. I would just laugh because I wanted to fit in so bad. And so that led me to, I got married to my high school girlfriend in 2002. And she and I had my oldest son, Devin. We had him together. We were already planning on getting married, but we were living together in an apartment, having sex out of wedlock. And she got pregnant 4 months before the wedding date. And I always justified it with, we're already planning on getting married. It's already planned. We just had to move up the date a little bit so she could fit into her dress. And so we had Devin a few months after we got married. And then she and I, she's a terrific mother. But she and I just became oil and water after some time because I was still trying to fit in the world, and she wanted to be, she wanted to do things the right way, and I didn't. I wasn't doing things irresponsibly, but I wasn't being a man of the house that I'm God calls us to be. And so after about 6 years, that marriage fizzled out, and I left, and I went to a military training for a different career field. They transitioned us to a different career field. So I went to military training, and I got involved with another female after Devin's mom and I had split. And she and I eventually got married. And I moved to Arizona, and that was an extremely unhealthy marriage. She ended up having an affair, and I couldn't leave because I was on military orders. So I had to deal with this stress and depression, and I really didn't fit in because she had manipulated the whole base out there because she had been there, and I wasn't to believing that I was a psycho and a crazy person that didn't know what they were talking about. And so I ended up leaving after that once my orders ended, and she and I got divorced, and then I came back here in, I believe it was October of 2010 because we met in May of 11. And when I came back, I had developed a real severe anger problem. And like I had mentioned, when I was a kid, I never got angry. And I used to unrighteously judge people for being angry. I always made fun of them, and I was like, there's no reason to be angry. Because in my mind, I'm very focused on the little things. I don't worry about big picture things. If I do all the 1,000 little things right, then the big picture will take care of itself. So
you get back to Wichita,
mm-hmm.
and you've just finished your second marriage.
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with anger issues, something that you've never dealt with.
Right.
Life is in a lot of ways for you, kind of a crumbling point. And so this is almost 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
Well, it was the strangest thing because I could see all the problems that I was having in myself, but I couldn't stop myself. So everything that I judged and hated people for as a youth, for being angry, and I never saw a point in being angry because it didn't get me to a solution. It just prolonged my problem. So why get angry about anything? And then I would, improperly judge somebody for it. So when I developed these problems, I started hating myself and judging myself. And instead of trying to understand and realize that I was being taught, this is what you were doing, this is what you were dealing with, that you were judging improperly and unrighteously, I just got more and more angry. And I would have moments where I would drive down the road, and for no reason whatsoever, there was no road rage. I would just be totally wide open roadway, and I would just get angry, and my whole body would get like sweating and hot, and I would get tunnel vision, and I would see like nothing to the sides and just like this tunnel of black right in front of me, and I wouldn't understand why I was angry. There was nothing to be angry about. I just got angry. And when I came back to the police department, because I had joined the police department by then, in Wichita. And something else that kind of rolled into the anger of not understanding is when I joined the police department in 2006, I had a daughter. My first wife and I, we had a daughter. And I know I'm kind of going all over the place. But my first wife and I, we had a daughter that was born in June 2006. That's also the week before I started the police academy. And the entire time that she was alive, minus about a week of combined time, she was living in the hospital, in the NICU and the ICU, and she was on about 4 different machines, and she was premature, and she had just an entire mountainside of issues, and then she died the Monday of the week I graduated the police academy, in our living room, and I had a lot of guilt over that because I couldn't imagine what kind of a dad I am or was, sleeping, probably dreaming about unicorns and rainbows at 2 o'clock in the morning while my daughter was 30 feet away dying in my living room. And I had a lot of shame about that, that I held on to for about 11 years. I held on to that. And, but we ended up, her mother and I, we started a nonprofit organization that we do a lot of work with Wesley and kids at the hospital. We try to do the positive thing about it. We have a 5K every year, and all in her memory sort of thing. And through, her name was Alexis. So through Lexi, God was giving me a lesson that I knew at the time, and then after she had died, I just completely lost track of that lesson. And in her 5 months and 10 days on this earth, she had a trach. One of her surgeries was a trach. And so she couldn't make any noise. She couldn't cry. But she had learned that if she held her breath, it would make all of her alarms go off on her machines. And we would come rushing to her cribside. And so she would hold her breath quite often. We'd come and then she would just smile because she knew she got her attention. And so we had learned to assess her and not so much the machines, in coordination with each other. And so in all those moments, I always had this resonating thought of, if my 5-month-old baby girl who has a leg deformity and has had 4 surgeries and has had pneumonia and her lung collapsed with breast milk, and she can still find a way to smile in through all this, and more than I'll ever deal with in my life, then what do I really have to be upset about? What do I have to not find joy in? Mm-hmm. And that was a lesson that I had that I completely lost through my police, career. And it fueled it fueled my anger even further. Because I would deal with, babies that were abused that were perfectly healthy. And how could these people treat their children this way when I had a baby that I was going to treat like a queen, and she was taken from me. And so that was very, very difficult. And one of the last things that I had to deal with was there was a vehicle accident in Wichita. And Erin and I worked together at this time. But there was a vehicle accident in Wichita where a 4-year-old boy ran out from between 2 cars at just the right moment of a car that wasn't speeding, doing anything wrong, had passed where this little boy had run out. And the boy, I think, was 4 at the time, and Aiden was also 4. And the front of the car clipped the young boy, and it sent him to the hospital. I won't get into the details of it, but it sent him to the hospital, and he had a lot of very serious injuries. And me being the officer on scene, I had to be in the emergency operating room with the doctors and the boys so I could witness anything that happened. And I stood there in a complete daze, and all I saw was, my son's face on this little boy. And that was the moment I was like, I have to get out of this. I've been followed home too many times. I've had too many guns pointed at me. I've cried and been, near suicidal over the thought of how can these kids be treated this way. And so I had to get out. And so Erin and I talked a lot about it. And I got out of the police department, and 10 years of it was enough. And so that's why I kind of went out and started driving a truck, because I can look through a window and not deal with that kind of stuff. support the family. But it was while I was driving a truck that my best friend since high school invited me to a men's encounter in August of 2017. And that's when I went there. And I remember before, I never gave up on faith, or I never gave up on believing that God was real. I always remember driving down highways and thinking, how could God do these kinds of things to me? And starting to blame him, not, completely unjustly, because it was all my own doing, my own choices that led me to where I was, trying to fit in through my military life and trying to fit in the police world and trying to do everything on my own and not putting anything in his hands. And I remember driving or riding in the van to that men's encounter and thinking, this is it. If I don't get anything from this, I've been to so many youth conventions. If I get nothing from this, then I'm just going to do my own thing, and God, you do you, and I'll do me. And on the Saturday night of that men's encounter, I broke harder than I'd ever broken in my entire life over my daughter, and the realization that I removed myself from my oldest son's life, who's an amazing young man that I couldn't be more proud of, and had to deal with a lot of that realization right there in Augusta. And that's when I know I was truly saved. That's when everything turned around for me, and I haven't had a lick of anger since. I haven't had any desires to do things that I used to do since, and I've just felt nothing but repentance and apologetic to my kid. And I've had many, many nights where I've said long apologies to him because of it.
Wow. When was that, Richard? The men's encounter. What year?
August of 2017. I can't remember the weekend. I believe it was the second weekend of the month. It was August of 17.
So,
yeah, I'm sorry.
you guys are married. You're married.
Yes.
Yes, at that point we were.
You get saved.
Yeah. Well,
and he comes home different.
He kind of skipped us.
Yeah, I kind of went beyond. I got rolling on the thing, and
yeah.
I apologize.
I was going to stop and go when we met, and then what happened to that, because we were not living right. And so we met through a friend. She introduced us. Our first date was the 13th of May. And
I came back October of 2010, and I didn't want to have anything to do with women because I just had 2 failed marriages. And
he told me when he met me that he was at the point where he was just going to start going out to clubs and having one-night stands because he didn't care anymore. Yeah. And then we met.
And I remember it was very surreal because I would pray to the Lord, or I would speak to the Lord and say, hey, just if you want someone in my life, put someone in my life. Just completely, half-hearted and nothing genuine about it. And so I was fooling myself to thinking that I was still living a proper Christian life because I had morals and ethics and I was treating people the right way. Mm-hmm. And
so we met May 13th, and we actually spent the night together that night, and you were at my apartment every night after that.
After I get off of work at 3 a.m., I'd drive down to Derby into her apartment, and we would just stay the night together until I had to go back to work the next day.
And then in June, found out I was pregnant. So here we are, unmarried, living together, basically living together, even though you hadn't officially moved in, and I'm pregnant. And I'm going, how am I going to tell my parents? Which I was already, 20... How old was I?
I was 29. So you would have been 28.
So here I am, 28, still having these thoughts like a 16-year-old girl would, going to her parents saying, hey, Mom, I know I'm unmarried, but I'm pregnant. And it took me a good month and a half until I started showing that I actually told her. And his family was very loving and accepting, and my mother was very loving. And it took her a minute to get around to the fact that here's her daughter having she knew I was living the way I was living. And that's one thing that I really want to encourage people. If you have children living lives they aren't living, or know people who are not living the right way, pray for them, because prayer does work. Mm-hmm. Because during that time, we were not looking out for ourselves. I mean, he could have been one of the other 5 guys that I had dated at that time, and I would have been right back into the situation that I had just left with my ex. And so even though we weren't looking out for ourselves, we had people praying for us, and God knew, and he put us together even though we didn't see it at the time, and he was still looking out for us. Because if it were anybody else, I wouldn't be where I am today.
And I remember thinking when she called me on the phone and told me that she was pregnant, the only thought that was going through my head was, I hope I can say something to convince her that I'm not, just going to be a drop dead person, just disappear on her.
I was really nervous. I'm like, I
And,
barely know this guy.
yeah,
What is he going to do?
All I could think about was putting myself in her mindset and be like, okay, how can I convince her that I'm not, that I'm not just going to disappear? And because I don't even think we knew each other's favorite color at that point.
I don't think so.
It had been 3.5 weeks since we had met. And, but I tried to tell her as much as I could to calm her down. I don't have any idea how.
He told his parents, and the funniest thing she said was, "You're sure it's yours, right?" He's like, "Yes, Mom.
Yeah.
I'm sure it."
So, so he comes home from men's encounter, okay? Are you saved at that point yet?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what he skipped.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell us about you and how you came to know the Lord.
Well, at that point, we were living in a house in Derby right across from Riley Park. We were renting a house there. He was out over at Riley playing catch with Devin, and you guys showed up to play softball. Well, Branson introduced himself to Richard, and Branson and I have known each other since we were little. And so he introduced him. I was at the house. He came over to get his stuff because you guys had invited them to play ball. And so I came over to watch, and Branson's like, "I know you." I'm like, "I know you." He's like, "Is that your husband?" I said, "Well, he's,
sort of
my boyfriend," because we weren't married at that point or even engaged at that point. And he goes, "Oh, okay. I just invited him to church. You guys should come to church sometime." And so that's how we got invited and heard about the well, and that was in 2013, the summer of 2013.
Right.
And then he was coaching baseball at the time, and it was on Sundays, and of course we didn't make it a real priority. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm not walking into this church. I'm living with a guy. I've had a baby out of wedlock. I know Branson. He knows what I grew up like. He knows who I was. And I'm like, I don't really know it. So I'm not going by myself. I got to wait until he's free on a Sunday to go with me, because there's no way I'm walking into a church building in the position I am now by myself. And so we had a free Sunday, and we went. And we went for a couple weeks after that.
We really liked it.
Yeah. And during that time, we ended up moving to Wichita. And we went a few more times. Of course, we didn't make it a huge priority, but it was March 9th of 2014 that I had to actually go back and look at your sermons because I didn't know what that was titled, but for prosperity's sake, it was when you preached out of Nehemiah, it's never hopeless. And so I don't really remember the message. All I remember is sitting there thinking, it's not hopeless. And so at the end of the message, I went up, and at that point, I thought I recommitted my life to Christ, because I thought I was saved at 12, even though I had done everything I had done. And because I still believed in God, so therefore I was still saved. But and then we had some things happen, and he started coaching baseball again, and our excursion broke down, and I still wasn't comfortable going by myself. And so I'm an introvert. And so when I don't like going out by myself, and so unless I have moral support, which is why he's sitting here doing his testimony with me at the same time, I don't like doing things by myself. And he had a shift change and started working Sundays, and so we didn't go. And that's when he went to men's encounter.
Yeah, because I had left. So I left the police department in August of 2016, and when I was leaving, I was like, well, what job can I do that can still provide for my family? And my dad had been driving a semi-truck since before I was born, and he always had money to provide for us. And we were never wealthy, but we never went hungry. And so,
well, I guess we got married before you went to men's encounter.
Yeah,
we got married September of 2014. So then we moved to Rose Hill, and then you switched jobs from the PD to the trucking.
Driving a truck. And I went over the road for about 10 months to get experience, to get a good local job. And I drove out of Newton, and I was home, or I was gone just as much as when I was over the road. And so that's when I had spoken with Jeremy Jones.
Not yet. Not yet, because we weren't going to, that was after.
Oh, you want to lead up to the encounter?
Yeah. And then you went to Encounter.
I'm all over the place. I'm
He is
scattered.
all over the place. We're probably missing it.
You're
So
good.
you go
No,
to
you're good.
Encounter.
Mhm.
And tell me again, 2018, right?
17.
August of 2017.
2017. The
And
last
then
part
when
of
he comes back, he's like, we need to find a church. And we were living in Rose Hill at this time. He's like, we really need to find a church. And I'm like, okay, well, he went to Men's Encounter with his friend who attended First MB out west. And so we were like, well, we'll just start going there, but from Rose Hill all the way out west. And then we wanted the boys to be involved in youth group and driving there. And their youth events were only like an hour long. So by the time I got home, I'd have to turn around. So I was just hanging out in the parking lot. I'm like, we need to find somewhere closer. And so we tried out a few different churches, and none of them really seemed like they would be a fit for us. And we're like, what about that one church we went to? I'm like, well, I
It was
think it's
Crossway
called,
when we first went to it.
Mhm.
yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I think it's called the Well now. He's like, yeah, that one. Let's go there. I'm like, okay. So
Well, when I was
2
at
weeks,
Men's Encounter, it was the same one that Branson had attended. And so I saw him there, and that's when I learned it was renamed The Well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came back, that's when I told her, I was like, well, I think they call it The Well now. And some people were saying that people over there are kind of crazy, and all they do is work out all the time. I was like, well, that sounds like my kind of place.
And so, yeah, we decided after trying a few places out, we're like, it was 2 weeks before Easter or after Easter. And we were like, well, let's go there. And he came, and we've been there since. So, and then it was around after we had come back and hearing you preach and getting some good sound biblical friends and everything in my life. Marlena Graham is a huge part of this, and I don't think she knew she was discipling me at the time, but she did a lot more discipling than she thought she probably did. But after talking to her and hearing you preach and reading the Bible for myself and finally having somebody tell me how to do that, it's not that hard. But, when I think of reading the Bible, I think of starting in Genesis and going all the way to Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you put out that Read Your Bible in a Year program. And so I started following that, and I'm like, wow, I'm getting a lot more out of this without having any tools or a workbook to fill out. And it was then that God told me, you didn't recommit your life in, 2014. You clearly and fully surrendered your life to me. That's when you were saved. And so that's my salvation date.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and all I can remember is a weekend in August of 2017 for mine. But yeah, I always had that. I know in a number of your sermons you had mentioned you always just want to have that little bit that you want to hold on to, and you won't want to fully surrender. And so that was my full surrender date. That was when I finally said, it's completely in your hands. I didn't want to be anxious about anything. Didn't want to fear anything.
That's the moment of life transformation.
Yeah. When
you've experienced it,
Mm-hmm.
but you just want to plead with people that 90%, 80%, it's not enough. And the reason it's not about how much you give, it's just a matter of the heart. As long as we're holding on to that 10% or 20% of here's what I want to do, we're still really saying to a degree, God, I don't trust you.
Right.
And I'm still going to keep control of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until that moment of full surrender that, God, I do trust you. I don't know what that means, what it's going to look like, where it's going to lead me, but I am done fighting you, God.
And God put us through some tests and really strengthened our trust and our faith. Since
then, I have, like I had mentioned earlier, I would never mention anything about my faith or Jesus or anything in my social circle because I didn't want it to cast me out of that social circle. And since then, all I can think about is Jesus and God. And somehow, like I've had people tell me that my conversations can become annoying because I always find a way to bring God back into it. And I was like, man, I love that. Like the fact that everything I have God in, and it just comes, like I'm not trying to force it. It's just I see God in everything. And it has led me to witnessing and testifying to people at my work. And one of my coworkers, I led him in a prayer of salvation and repentance just last week. And so I'm trying to help him and learn myself because at the same time, I'm trying to convince myself that I'm worthy, which I don't have to convince myself. I know, God's already made me worthy. But I still feel like I'm a baby Christian at the same time, because like I knew all the superficial portion of all the biblical stories and everything that happened, but I never knew any like details, and I never knew some of the things that that you've taught until I started studying for myself and coming and listening to your messages. And so all I'm praying for now is, Lord, give me strength so that I can help this new Christian while I'm a new Christian in myself.
Amen.
But it's been absolutely incredible, and
We've had
I can't wait for tomorrow, because even though I'm not supposed to plan for tomorrow, I can't wait for tomorrow. And then tomorrow, I can't wait for the next day.
Amen.
Yeah. And we've also seen a lot of God's faithfulness in the way He takes care of us, because He did quit the police department. He got his CDL, went over the road, got a local job, and then after we've been coming to the well, that's when he met up with Branson, and we were talking to Jeremy Jones about the insurance thing. He's like, well, this truck driving job, I'm still not home. I'm not seeing my family as much, and the insurance thing sounded really good. And so he's like, and my dad, growing up, my dad was an insurance salesman, so I knew how unreliable the commission-based jobs can be. And I'm like, I don't know. Can you still work and do this? And he's like, I think I really need to. He goes, I think God's telling me I really need to just let go, jump in with both feet, and this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is where I'm supposed to be. It didn't make sense, but we prayed about it, and we had this overwhelming sense of peace that, yes, this is the road, this is the path we're supposed to go down. And so that's what happened. He did. He jumped in with both feet. And
that was the first time that I heard God say something to me, and it was, Richard, you've always had one foot in the water and one foot on shore your entire life. And if you want to truly follow me now, then I need you to put both feet in the water. And I said, yes, 100% yes. And then I went back and spoke with Erin about it, and we're like, okay, here we are. And there was a lot of struggles, but through the last 2 years, there's been some extreme financial struggles. But we've never been without. We've never been hungry. Praise God for friends and family in the church. But we still have a house.
And there for a while, I was like, we can't ask for help because we put ourselves in this situation, Because people aren't going to understand that we were just, why would God tell you to leave a job where you actually had an income to doing something so we can't ask for help because we did this to ourselves. That was my mindset. And then Marlena was the one that says, no, you follow God's path for you. If you need something, ask for help. So it was a very humbling experience. And even, through that, we've met some people and been able to witness to them. And those people are not in our lives anymore, but we thought they were in our lives for one reason. And I think God showed us that it was actually for a completely different reason that they came into our lives. And we did the work there that we needed to do, and we sowed the seeds we needed to do. And now God is going to harvest those, whether we see it in our lifetime or not. Those seeds eventually will come and be harvested. But
I had moved on and got employment at Lowe's, and I've been driving a truck for Lowe's doing deliveries Monday through Friday, and I love the job. I feel like I'm in a retirement job already compared to the stress of what I had in the police department. And I remember walking in on my first day, and there was a welcome mat on the aisle that I walked down to go to the back to get all my stuff in the morning. And it had a message on it. I can't remember the exact word. I have a picture of it, but it was basically a message that said, "You're where you belong." And I remember tearing up as I walked into Lowe's on my first day reading that. And since then, we've been blessed to the point where there's no struggles and we're on a good path. And
the real kicker to me, there's the verse in Matthew where it says God will take, He takes care of the plants and the birds. I'm paraphrasing, but why would He not take care of you? That verse is what got us through the last 2 years. We got back from doing our tax return, and we looked at how much money we had made just in this last year. And I'm like, the only reason for us not being homeless, not being destitute, not being out on the street, still having our house and our vehicle is God. There's no way we could have supported a family of 7 on, what we made. There's no way. And until it's like right there in your face, and then you're like looking back on everything and just how God makes everything work together. I'm like,
we got in the car after that meeting and we just both kind of like looked up and we're like, praise Jesus, thank you. Thank you
this
so
is
much.
the only way we are not out on the street right now.
But God, He's
Yeah.
so
But
faithful.
God,
Yeah.
Yep.
So
And
just
every little thing.
it was hard. Going through that, I wish I could say I did it perfectly and in perfect faith and just knowing. But no, there were times where I'm like, I don't understand. And I would put my Bible away and I would quit praying because I just didn't understand, And when I'm mad at somebody, I stop talking to them. So I was kind of giving God the silent treatment. I'm like, I'm not talking to you because I'm mad at you. But even through that, He was still faithful and He still remained faithful even though my faith wavered, And it's just
we're
amazing
both so
to
much
see.
stronger for it.
Yeah. Our marriage is stronger.
Mhm.
We're stronger spiritually.
I think in the just over 9 years we've been together, God's blessed me with a marriage and a wife that I never thought I'd deserve. I still don't believe that I deserve, that I earned by any means. But in just over 9 years, I think we've had like one actual argument with a woman that I met, and had to get to know her in 3.5 weeks before she got pregnant with our 8-year-old now. And but it's been
And that's
all
what I
God,
mean by
completely God.
pray for people that are in a situation you want them out of, because God will look out for them. Because that's the only explanation for why this worked. With the way we met and the way we were living. That's the only explanation behind it, is we had people interceding for us and standing in that gap for us.
So guys, it has been a joy to watch you over this last several years.
Yes.
I mean, you guys are truly just kind of a beam of sunshine. You're the type of people that when we're around you, you make us want to smile. You make us want to laugh. I'm so thankful that God has brought you guys into our lives, and grateful for the testimonies of not only what God did to you or for you, but what He's doing through you guys right now. Great testimony of leading, co-worker to the Lord recently. That's what Christianity is all about. Disciples making disciples. And I just want to encourage you guys to trust that in many ways the journey is just beginning.
Yeah.
And if it's been good so far, I believe your better years are still ahead of you.
I just wish I didn't wait so long.
Yeah, I know that I keep saying. Even though I was saved in 2014, it took me, 4 or 5 years to actually start living it,
Yeah.
So if I would have started in 2014 when it actually happened, look how much further, but you can't look back. God didn't. God has me where He wants me now.
Yes.
Amen.
Yep. Well, thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope you all have a good night.
God bless.